The grand jury sits before a trial has actually begun. The purpose of the grand jury is to review the prosecutor's case and decide whether there's sufficient evidence to warrant actually charging someone and going forward with a regular trial.
Criminal trials in half of the states and in all federal cases cannot begin unless a grand jury meets first, examines the evidence, and issues what is called an indictment.
An indictment just starts the process. It's just a charge. It's an allegation. There's the presumption of innocence still exists for the person who is accused, but the grand jury is a very common way to begin a criminal justice process.
The grand jury differs from a petit jury in a number of ways.
Federal grand juries typically have between 16 to 23 jurors. The number of grand jurors at the state level varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Instead of a unanimous vote, majority rule is all that is required to issue an indictment, and that is possible by ensuring there are enough jurors present at all times to constitute a quorum.
A quorum is the least amount of grand jurors one can have and still proceed in the case.
They actually had subpoena power and investigatorial power.
The grand jury meets in secret where it hears witness testimony, and only the prosecutor can present evidence. There's no judge present at the proceedings, and generally no defense attorneys are there on behalf of the defendant or accused.
Grand jurors can ask questions of the witnesses or of the prosecutors.
The grand jury began in 12th century England to check the power of the king. Suddenly, the king or his government couldn't just put someone in jail, but had to get enough evidence to convince other citizens to lock up one of their own. That system is similar to the one we use today.
Grand jury has been called both the sword and the shield. It's the sword for the prosecution in order to find out the truth and to find out whether there is enough evidence to actually charge someone with a crime. But it's also a shield. The grand jury should shield our citizens from an overreaching government, a government that might want to bring someone to trial without sufficient evidence.
Because our Constitution, in addition to providing for the right to trial by jury, also provides that citizens will have the last word on whether criminal charges are lodged before their fellow citizens.
The amount of time a juror may be called to serve can also be significantly different than in a petit or a normal jury trial. In North Dakota, a grand jury will convene for about 10 days, but in Rhode Island and South Dakota, terms can last 18 months. Federal grand juries also sit between 18 and 24 months, but not every day.
They meet 2 or 3 days a month, or perhaps a couple days every other week.
Not every state uses a grand jury to charge a defendant, but every state can use a grand jury to investigate criminal activity.
A good prosecutor will use a grand jury to test the strengths and weaknesses of his or her case. Because remember, a grand jury can talk back to the police officers and can ask questions of the prosecutor. So it's important that grand jurors remember that they're not simply an arm of the prosecution, but they're functioning as independent men and women and able to make their own judgment.